All right, today we are cracking the code on a topic that is absolutely essential for any serious investor: hedge fund fees. We're going to dive into how savvy investors make sure they're only paying for real, top-tier performance, not just for showing up.
So let's just start with this one big question. When you put your hard-earned money into a fund, how do you really know the manager's goals are aligned with yours? I mean, how do you stop them from getting a huge bonus just for winning back money they already lost? Well, that exact problem is what we're going to solve today.
To get our heads around these protections, we have to start with the industry standard. You've probably heard of it, right? It's called the 2 and 20 fee structure, and it's pretty much the baseline for how the whole hedge fund world operates.
Okay, so the first part of that is the 2. This is the 2% management fee. Sometimes it's a bit less, maybe closer to 1%, but it's charged every single year on the total assets in the fund. And here's the key: it gets paid whether the fund makes money or loses money. You can think of it as the cost of keeping the lights on. And now for the other shoe to drop, the 20. This is the 20% performance fee. You'll also hear it called an incentive fee. And this is the big one, folks. It's a slice of the profits the fund actually generates. But, and this is a really big but, how do you define profit? Because that's where things start to get really interesting.
So let's break it down. You've got two pieces. There's the management fee, that's a fixed percentage, paid every year, no matter what. And then you have the incentive fee, which is a percentage of the profits. One is a constant, the other is totally variable. And believe me, it's in that variable part where the details make all the difference.
Okay, so this brings us to our first major tool for protecting investors: the high watermark. This whole concept was designed to stop managers from getting paid performance fees just from making back money they already lost. It's all about making sure they only get rewarded for taking your investment to new heights.
So what is a high watermark? It's actually super simple. It's just the highest value the fund has ever reached. If the fund's value drops, the manager can't touch that 20% incentive fee again until the fund climbs past its old record. Simple as that. They only get paid for new profits, not for digging out of a hole they created.
You know, the name itself has a pretty cool origin. It comes from the way ancient Egyptians would literally mark the highest point the Nile's flood reached. That mark told them where it was safe to build. In the same way, investors use a high watermark to set the peak performance a fund has to beat before the manager gets a bonus. It's a perfect analogy.
Let's make this real. Imagine your investment starts at $100. It has a rough year, drops down to 75. The next year, the manager does a fantastic job and brings it all the way back up to 100. Now, without a high watermark, they might try to charge you 20% on that $25 gain. But with a high watermark, nope, they get nothing. And why is that? Because you're just back where you started. That fee only kicks in once the fund pushes past that old high to $101 and beyond.
But hang on a second. What if the entire market is up, say, 10%, but your fund is only up 1%? Yeah, it's above the high water mark, but is that really performance worth the big fee? That's where the second layer of protection comes in. It's called the hurdle rate, and it's all about setting a minimum standard of success.
A hurdle rate is basically a performance threshold. It means the fund has to hit a certain minimum return, let's say 7% a year, before the manager can even start thinking about taking their 20% cut. This makes sure the manager gets rewarded for true outperformance, not just for having a pulse in a rising market.
The easiest way to think about this is like a high jump competition. The bar is set at the hurdle rate. If the fund manager's performance doesn't clear that bar, they don't get the prize, which is that incentive fee. It doesn't matter that they jumped. What matters is if they jumped high enough. So, for example, let's say a fund returns 9% in a year. The hurdle rate was set at 7%. Because the fund cleared that hurdle, the manager is eligible for their incentive fee. But here's the important part. Usually they can only charge that fee on the profits above the hurdle. So, in this case, on that 2% difference. Okay, so now let's put these two powerful tools together. Because when you combine a high water mark and a hurdle rate, you get what is basically the ultimate protection for an investor. This is how you truly get your interests and the fund manager's interests on the same page.
So just to recap, the high water mark makes sure you only pay for performance that takes you to new peaks, not just for recovering from a loss. And the hurdle rate makes sure you only pay for outperformance that clears a minimum benchmark.
Now, the most sophisticated, investor-friendly funds use both. And when they do, the manager has to satisfy two conditions to get that incentive fee. First,
the fund's value must be above its old high water mark. And second, its return for the year must be above the hurdle rate. If even one of those conditions isn't met, there's no incentive fee. It's the ultimate 1-2 punch for investor protection.
So what's the bottom line here? Let's boil it down. High water marks stop you from paying for the same performance twice. Hurdle rates set a minimum bar for what actually counts as a good return. The best funds use both. And probably the most important thing is that you, the investor, absolutely have to understand this stuff before you put a single dollar in.
And that really brings us to our final thought. Now that you're armed with this knowledge, the next time you're looking at an investment, you know the rules of the game. So what's the first question you should ask about the fees? It's not just, what do you charge? It's how exactly do you earn it?